Hey, Neil McDonnell here. We're going to get started in a little bit here on our understanding the acquisition lifecycle, especially from a sales perspective. For those of you who are here already, welcome. Thanks for joining. I'm going to get started here. It's 12 o'clock. I'm going to start doing live events on LinkedIn every single day. And if you were here yesterday, I've been doing this for a long time, once before, right? I started yesterday and we're off to a second day in a row. So I'm really proud of myself and the team. But one of the things I want to just say thank you to as we move forward and those of you who find this content valuable, I just want to give little rewards. You know, a lot of times you have to watch a whole webinar or something like that. And when you get to the end, if you stay to the end, I'll give you a special reward or special prize or something. Well, what I want to start doing is giving that early on and saying, look, if you were here in the beginning part, first minute or two at the start of these live events, I want to think of some little rewards, some little tip I can give you that'd be helpful for you. So for today, and right now up until 1 more minute, so 2 minutes after, anybody who joins in this early time, send me a private message in LinkedIn and you should be able to connect with me or follow, but definitely connect with me as well. You just go into LinkedIn, hit the 3 little dots, and instead of follow, it takes you to connect. Let me know if you can't figure that out. But anyway, send me if you've got a challenge. What's your biggest challenge? You have a challenge related to the proposal. You have a challenge related to getting in the door. You have a challenge related to capture on a particular opportunity, and you're at this place and you want to go here and you can't figure it out. You have a challenge with hiring. I don't care what it is. If it's in the GovCon space, let me know. I can probably help you on most things. And if I can't, I'll find the person who can. But I want to do that as a little reward to those of you who are joining at the beginning of our live events each day. I'm going to try to come up with something. So again, let me know in the chat if you're seeing me okay and can hear me okay. But I want to get started first I'm going to share my screen. This is a little different from yesterday. Yesterday, I just talked the whole time. But I want to share my screen and begin to talk to you about a couple things. That was pretty crazy. Right here, and I'm going to see what this one looks like. But right here, what I'm just pointing out is the GovCon Chamber's website. If you haven't been there, go to govconchamber.com. And on here, I have different tools we've created, and we'll just keep adding to this. But these are really helpful tools that the Chamber puts together. This first one is the Small Business Specialist Directory. It doesn't just include almost 1,000, I think more than 1,000 small business specialists and professionals within the government, but it also includes the Small Business Liaison Officers from larges and the folks I call the 7 mentors we're starting to put in there as well, PTACs, Women Business Centers, et cetera. And then as you move to the right, folks were looking for a forecast list. And so we've started a forecast directory. It's just a single place you can go to try to find links to the next directory. So anyways, you can see these yourself. Come in, you'll see us adding to it. Some of these have different people's direct names, phone numbers, and emails. From a sales perspective in the GovCon space, we always struggle for finding the right points of contact to be able to do our sales, et cetera. So we put these directories for you on that part. Let me go ahead and stop sharing here for a second. I'm going to switch back to my studio. I'm learning as I go along on that, the window where you saw that stagger. So anyways, I'm going to get started on today's topic on selling to the federal agency. The reason I kind of titled it that with a subtitle of Understand the Acquisition Lifecycle is because if you're going to sell to any customer, commercial, federal, it doesn't matter, you need to understand their acquisition lifecycle. How do they think and how do they buy as they go forward, right? And so when you understand the acquisition lifecycle, you understand how to get in there and start working on it. Let me share my screen for a quick little presentation. This time I'm just going to use a deck. And so I'm going to go in and talk off this one slide. This slide, if you want it later on for handout, I'd be happy to give it to those of you who showed up. But so in the federal acquisition lifecycle, it begins with an idea. Somebody somewhere has got an idea. Hey, we should build a new hospital wing. We should convert all of our Apple computers to Windows computers. You know, whatever it is, somebody's got an idea. So that's where it begins. And I'm going to go through and explain each of these in more detail. in particular, how it relates to your sales efforts and what you should be thinking about on sales. So they have an idea, and then it moves into requirement exploration is what I call it, right? And remember, what I'm trying to do is simplify the process here, not make it overly complex like you would find in really formal documents with hundreds of different process steps. It really is pretty straightforward. There's an idea, then they begin to develop that idea by doing requirement explorations. And again, I'll come back to that in a second. That then leads into market research. And this is where now the government buyers are reaching out to industry directly and trying to understand information from the industry using the acquisition folks to help with that. Again, I'll talk more about that. From there, the market research leads into the RFP phase, which many of you already know about. They'll pick a winner or two, and so a contract will be awarded, and then there's execution. What I describe when I look at these is the difference between informal market research or informal activities that are happening during the procurement lifecycle and formal stuff. So you can see the two outer ones are informal. It's informal when they're just thinking about an idea. They haven't even gone to the contracting officer and said, hey, we're thinking about getting this. They're still just trying to decide whether they even want it. You know, people come up with ideas all day long. Should those ideas turn into something that then needs to be budgeted and accounted for in a formal way going forward? So the middle part, I think we're all familiar with. That's where a lot of us play in government contracting. We tend to get ourselves caught up in the market research and the RFP phase. And then the last one I threw down, execution, is another informal area. One of the ways you can think about execution is the contract's happening, and there's this ability to go back and have informal conversations with them, not about trying to get on this contract, but it's probably going to be recompeted in 5 years. At any given point from the time it's awarded till it's awarded again, or it goes into market research, you're in this informal stage where you can go back and learn more about it. So that's why I put that as informal. So when you think about informal, this is where I think all of us salespeople should be playing. We need to be in there understanding how do we shape the customer's view of a requirement. If they have an idea, how do we get them to shape that idea towards our strengths or what we offer? Whether it's, I was using an example with somebody about flooring. You know, maybe they want linoleum flooring because wood flooring is too complicated to clean on a nightly basis or something. Well, we sell wood flooring, and we can go in there and talk to them about how, hey, do you know that the technology related to flooring has changed and evolved? The products have evolved, that now it's easier to clean wood floor than it is linoleum. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but if you sell wood flooring, you can go in there and do it. It's the same thing with technology, whether it's emerging technology or existing technology, professional services. In that idea phase, I call it implied needs. They have an implied need, and until they go to the formal stage, they don't have an explicit need. Remember, implied is I'm thinking I have this need. Explicit is I have this need and I'm buying it. No matter what, I'm buying it. That means I'm explicitly stating that I have this need. It needs to be solved. That's why I call it, that's why I'm saying most of us play in that formal area, market research and RFP phase, which is when the explicit need has been identified and communicated to industry. We want to push back out and push to the left here. Shift to the left is what we call it, right? Into the idea and the requirement exploration phase. And so let me talk about a couple of different ways. You can read them here if you're looking at the screen or if you're just listening to me. I'll talk about some of these ways. The most classic way used to be white papers. People would submit white papers all the time, 3 pages, 30 pages. It didn't really matter. It was talking on a topic. Those are still helpful, but it's not the only way people absorb information now. And so you want to be able to use the media that each of us are using, right? Right now you're on LinkedIn Live. That's not a bad way to do it. I put that as the second to bottom bullet here. LinkedIn engagement. Well, that could be LinkedIn Live, just like this, where you could do events and you talk about whatever your product or service is. Maybe you only do this once a week, but it's a way for the customer to begin to learn from you. And if you listened to me yesterday, I described it as showing yourself as a supreme domain authority or a subject matter expert. So anyways, as you come down looking at this list, podcasts are another great way to share information. People can listen to it on the way to work. Buyers, I'm in the DC area, right? Buyers have an hour, 2-hour commute every single day. That's a lot of captive time. And if you can start driving them to your podcast, then they can listen to that and begin to learn what you want them to learn about your products. If you're in data analytics, data science, data engineering type stuff, you might want them to be thinking about data from a certain perspective. And using a podcast, it's a way for you to have a captive audience to a degree. They're in a car, right? But also to be able to just take your time explaining. People tend to listen to the podcast longer. So you can do 15, 20, 30-minute podcasts, no problem, on a topic if people will listen to it. You can expand that to something like I'm doing right now, right? I'm trying to reach people who are salespeople primarily within the federal government space, primarily small businesses. That's who I want to help. But frankly, this is useful to large companies as well, salespeople in there to know how do I really shape opportunities. Well, I'm using a video like this. It just happens to be LinkedIn is where I'm starting it, but I'm using LinkedIn Live. That's a feature of theirs. I'm delivering it live to you. They'll record it. Ironically, or coincidentally, they'll give you, or conveniently, they'll give me a audio file, an MP3 at the end, and they'll also give me an MP4, a video file. So I'm able to take the audio file, go put it on my podcast, take the video file, go put it on YouTube. Well, you could do something similar. Again, it doesn't have to be every day, but if you did this once a week on your core competency, at the end of the year, you would have 52 unique pieces of content that are telling your story, not random stuff, but telling your story about data or about flooring or whatever it is, helping the customer think about what they're doing. Because in this informal stage, they're trying to figure out, what do we want to do? What should our requirements be? Should we go Microsoft or Oracle, right? Wood floors or linoleum? This is your chance to get in there and push it. If you have a certain certification, you're able to get in there much earlier and stress why it's important that you have CMMI level 3 certification for software development projects. So white papers, podcasts, YouTube videos. Another one is direct meetings, right? Being able to get in to the buyer, talk to the buyer with no opportunity in mind. Meaning, you didn't go to GovWin, you see an opportunity in the RFI or the RFP. You don't even see something off the forecast. It's the long range forecast. What you're doing is going in, when I say no opportunity, you're going in to talk to them about their goals, their challenges, and also about what you can bring to their mission. Maybe you're dealing with emerging technologies and you want to inform them about where technology is going, how they might be able to begin to think about it in the next year, 3 years. And you're just starting and having these meetings that are around developing the requirements within their mind and your ability to kind of influence the conversation. Plus, you can learn about their challenges, learn about their goals that they have. And maybe this allows you to hear about opportunities that are going to go into that formal market research stage before they even hit that stage. And so you want to have as many meetings as you can that relate to this. And sometimes people might think it's hard. And it really comes down to just a process of, how do I find the buyer, that program office? And I'll give you a great example. Crane, Indiana, Matt Burkett is the small business specialist out there. You can follow him on LinkedIn and connect with him. But his organization, large organization, spends billions. They do a fantastic presentation at least once a year to industry about all the things they're working on. And when they do it, they're bringing the buyers, and the buyers are giving their names, emails, and phone numbers, saying, contact us if you have questions. You don't want to just call and say, hey, you got a project, give it to me. But if you can call and begin to have that dialogue about the requirements, they would value it because you're helping them brainstorm and think about where they want to go. And you would absolutely value it, right? To hear what they have to say. So the last one, I said LinkedIn Live is a way to do it like I'm doing now, but LinkedIn engagement. So another way that you could get involved is being engaged on LinkedIn, like I am, very engaged out here, but going back to, let's say, cloud. Let's say you're in the IT business and your focus is cloud, Amazon, Microsoft, doesn't really matter. So there's a guy out there, his name's Paul Puckett, and he's the head of the Army Cloud. I don't know what his official title is, right? But he's the top dog for cloud. And he's very active on LinkedIn. And when you follow him, you can hear his way of thinking. You can hear what he's talking about with the Army. You can also see him engaging on other agencies and DoD about what they're doing with cloud, or even what they're doing with other related technologies, maybe data in the cloud or cybersecurity in the cloud. And by finding somebody like him and following, he's what I call an influencer. And then you just engage when it makes sense, right? Don't spam him. Don't get out there and just do it for, hey, let me give a thumbs up for no reason. But if he's talking about something that you can relate to, that's when you can begin to contribute. Yeah, we used to think this, and through our experience, we've found this. And LinkedIn just calls this content engagement. You're starting a discussion within social media, right? Think away from Facebook, and here it's a professional dialogue. And most times within LinkedIn, you can find the type of buyers you're looking for in there. So get engaged on LinkedIn. It doesn't have to be a lot. You could commit to 15 minutes, 5 minutes a day. And imagine 5 minutes a day and you find one Paul. You've got a lot of people at the end that you're building relationships with. And most importantly, you're learning from. You're hearing about their challenges and their needs. Their strategic documents are out there for you to read. So LinkedIn's a great place. And then the last place on Informal is conference and events. And so the reason I mentioned this is I just went to an Air Force conference with somebody. And I'm already forgetting whether it was last week or the week before. But at this Air Force conference were a lot of buyers and influencers within the Air Force related to everything that was out there. And so you have this ability to, one, just go to their events and listen to hear what they're talking about, and then follow up. So many sessions where the speakers were up there was 3 or 4 people. And often they would say, hey, reach out to us, talk to us. And so whether you're trying to reach out to a agency like the Air Force Program Office or a large prime, they had their folks down there as well. But you can begin to get in the conversations. And really all this comes back to, remember, that idea and requirement exploration. It's when they're thinking through their ideas. Is it realistic? Should we be thinking about it? How do we implement artificial intelligence in our organization? Excuse me. So anyways, when you think about where you're at and what informal market research is like, this is where it's at. There's no real rules at all in there. The next one I wanted to show is related to market research when it starts getting into the formal phase, right? And when I say formal, I literally mean as formal, and I'll show you in a minute the FAR. But there's just a FAR, defense FAR, and there's the FAR, whatever, right? There's a regular FAR, the acquisition.gov. And when you go in there, there's a whole section that explains market research. I always tell people, don't try to become an expert at the FAR. If you're large enough that you need to overly worry about the FAR, at that point, you probably have somebody on your team who's an expert at the FAR, excuse me. And they're helping you all stay compliant the same way you might have somebody who's an expert at ISO certification and they're helping everybody be process compliant. You want to be generally aware of the FAR is my recommendation as you need it. So just in time FAR knowledge. But market research, it's a great one to look through because it's like, 15, 20-minute read. But when you read it, you go, that's what they're doing. And the reason I'm bringing it up to you, though, is at this stage of the buying process or the procurement life cycle, it becomes formal. There's rules in there that the government has to follow. And so this is where you see them maybe say, well, I can only talk to people one way or another. I have to talk to all vendors or I have to do certain things. They're trying to reference the FAR. They're still a little confused in my mind as it relates to the market research, because market research is supposed to be talk to anybody. But the point is, at this stage, they get a little more worried about making sure they're dotting their I's, crossing their T's, and not doing anything wrong, which is fair. But understanding how they do their job will make it easier for you to do your job. So then as you move forward, some of these things should obviously be very familiar with you, to you. RFI, right? There's an RFI and a sources sought. People use the terms interchangeable, whatever, but basically RFI, request for information, means I'm trying to learn more about the technology or the requirement I'm developing. Sources sought is I'm trying to learn more about the acquisition side of the house. What firms are out there? Should I set it aside to small? Can I set it aside to women-owned or hub zone? This is where the contracting officer is really trying to see what is industry response going to look like. Do I need to go full and open to be able to make sure we get enough responses back? But basically, that's the difference between those. Those are still awesome opportunities to be able to influence the opportunity, but they're not nearly as great as the informal phase. In here is where they determine the set aside, like I just mentioned. And the last one I want to mention is DSBS, because if you go into the FAR and you look at this, they talk about the dynamic small business search, right? That's a small business administration SBA tool that's connected to GSA SAM. Those two make up what I call your small business profile. And buyers will go in, run a search, try to find firms that do data analytics and our hub zone or something, right? They'll run these searches and then document it and say, hey, we tried to find hub zones. There was none, so we're going full and open or whatever, right? I'm minimizing that example for those of you who are really experienced. But the point is they use DSBS. They have some of this formal guidance. And you want to read the guidance and actually, when you're targeting an agency, talk to them and get more clarification on when you do market research, where are you looking? Because I want to be where you're looking. And in this case, DSBS is hands down the number one tool where buyers look. And so make sure you get in there and update that. that's a great way to be found. It's less of an active tool and it's more of a reactive tool, but it's still very simple to get done, and it can help you. So you've got the informal, you move into the formal. I'm not really talking about the RFP phase award and execution in so much detail, except for to say when it goes into the RFP phase, and by the way, when you think about draft PWS, to me, that's market research, right? Somebody might say it's RFP phase. It's not, because if they're still looking for input, then there's still market. They're trying to say, what does the market want us to do? And if you can influence a draft PWS, then we're still influencing the requirements. So we're still in marketing to me, market research. But RFP phase, it becomes this completely formal lockdown phase. You're not talking to the buyer, and it's now really a compliance exercise. If you've done your capture correct, proposal managers are just knocking it out of the park. So there's not anything you can really do there. In award, though, you can pick back up and begin to do selling again. And this is, to me, at the very earliest of the next sale, because if you wrote a response and won or did not win, you have the chance for a debrief often. And debrief just means you have a chance to talk to the buyer and say, hey, why did I win? Why did I not win? And they'll give you information that can be very helpful going forward. Plus, it gives you a chance to just talk to them again about, hey, who would I talk to if I wanted to follow up on this type of work? Not this opportunity. I just lost this SharePoint application, but there's a SharePoint migration I think is coming. Who could I talk to? An award period, debrief period, is a great time to try to, if you can get into a debrief, to be able to start pushing forward beyond just the individual opportunity, but into the agency. You want to always be doing business development and marketing, right? So that's a great opportunity. Execution to me is about the beginning of an expiring contract. Now, right here at this linear process, the execution is the contract ends 5 years away, let's say. But most of us will advise you, hey, as you're looking at an agency and you see work you want, find the contracts that are expiring and begin to pursue them. That's what I mean in this execution phase. But it goes back to being informal, because in this case, it's not so much they have an idea, a brand new idea, but there is this level of them looking at the current contract year after year as it's being executed and having ideas of what they might want in the next contract, PWS, things they could change, maybe ways you could influence it. Hey, I knew you guys were looking here, but next time you let this contract out, maybe you should be thinking about this. Well, if you can get in 12, 24 months early, then you really have the chance to influence it. And so that's just the full life cycle. And by the way, that's not for you early stages. If you guys are under 5 million, don't even worry about that at the moment. Go work with small businesses, like I said in yesterday's live. So this last thing I want to show you right here is the at the very top, you see where I've got relationship strength and influence. And the idea is, if everybody says this, right? I'm not saying anything brand new, but if you're hearing about it in SAM, you're too late. And I would argue that that's kind of the case a little bit for RFIs and sources sought, only to this example. I'm not telling you not to respond to it, because I think it's awesome and many people often don't respond. So it's a great opportunity, but not even remotely as great or as strong as shifting over to the idea or shifting left stage. And so I'm encouraging you to do that. I wanted to give you one last thing on this topic. And it's as I do these lives, what I'd like to do is to give you a task. You decide whether you want to take it or not, but a task that if you just spent the time watching this video or participating in this live event, what could you do today that moves it forward? And what I would recommend you do is identify what your true one core competency is. You know, are you doing a lot of different things? I know people who talk about they do IT and software development, they do cyber, they do some data center work, they do this, they do that. And it gets too much for any market researcher or buyer to be able to understand or pigeonhole you. You want to be known for one thing that allows you to then expand to everything else you want to do. Now, obviously, if you're a large business, multi-billion dollar, you can throw in a couple of things and that's fine. But from most of the people who would watch my content, your small businesses under the $40 million mark, what's the one thing? And you might have three things, and I'm okay with that. If you're at 40 million, you have three. But what is your number one thing? What are you the best at? And actually, if you throw that into chat, that would be great. But let me pop back to my screen here. If you throw that in chat, I'd love to see that. Otherwise, if you can, just chase that, it'll allow you to then go, am I communicating my one thing to the customer? And it'll allow you to go, who's the best person with the ideas? Remember, shifting to the left to hear about my one thing. So that's my wrap for today on selling to the federal agencies, understanding the acquisition lifecycle. One other thing I mentioned, the FAR, right? So here is, I'm not sharing. Let me get back here. Just want to share the FAR really quick. So I think I'm sharing this now. And in the FAR, you can see the language in here. And they talk about how they do it, why they do it, things like that. And you can see it's not that long. I mean, this is the whole read. So there's not much in there. And you can see the compliance that they have to do as well, what they have to report to people. Same thing on the where I talked about DFARs, so on the defense side, and then DISA's FAR. So I think I just shared it, but did not share it. Let me see. Oh, sorry about that. So I'm talking to it, but I didn't do it. So here's the FAR, and I'll grab that and put it in. But so there's the FAR, there's the DFAR, and then the DISA, what I'm calling the DISA FAR, or the DARS is what they call it. So let me stop sharing that. I'm going to put this in the chat and wrap up. So for anybody who's on, do you have any questions? If there's any questions you have now you'd like to ask, feel free to ask me, and I can try to respond right now, or I can bring it back as a topic another time or answer it the next day. While I'm waiting to just see if there's any last minute things, I did want to mention, somebody asked me a question yesterday, said they're not really getting a lot of traction, or they haven't really begun yet in government contracting. Where do I get started? And so what I'd highly recommend is go back to my first live video yesterday, which talks about the 3 ways to make money. And if you're not making money, start with teaming up with small businesses for the next 3 years. There's no rush to get a prime contract. If you're building a long-term business and you want to have it making tens of millions of dollars a year, it begins with the first 100,000. It begins with the first million. That's going to come from small business teaming. That's a great place to work, and it's a great place to find people who are going to support you. I tried to put it into chat. It didn't work, so I got to figure out why you guys can post a chat, but I can't. But I can come back to that later. But if you're looking for DFARS stuff, or FAR acquisition, just go to Google and type in FAR market research, and you'll find everything that I'm talking about. I think we're good to go. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to wrap up a little early here, and letting you just a reminder that we're doing this every day, 12 to 12:30 live. So we've got the next 3 sessions, just in case people are curious why I refused a $5 million contract I'm going to do tomorrow. It's this day I refused a $5 million contract. The 7 mentors is Thursday and Friday. Our matchmaking sessions worth it. So those are the 3 topics. Remember, government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. Have a great day.